Okay, we're going to look at criteria 5. And criteria 5 is the use of a range of design elements and design principles to develop and refine design concepts. Here you can see the assessment rubric for criteria 5. You've gotten very familiar with these, and remember that these can be downloaded from the site under resources, SAT and SAT assessment. You'll see that we've got the description of the criteria on the far left and what it is. It's worth 10 marks. Then we've got the levels of performance descriptors from very low all the way up to very high. Now, if we sort of unpack this a little bit further, we can look at what criteria 5 is all about. Just a reminder again, it's about design elements and design principles. And these two descriptions here are in the high range. Now let's look at some of the key words here. Looking at aesthetic factors, and this is how you use beautiful design, and it's really aesthetics are about beauty. And it means, using the design elements and design principles in a very sophisticated and professional way. You can see there we're looking at a diverse range of concepts, and the way you show diversity is through using lots and lots of different elements and principles and just trying lots of different things out. You'll see also that it relates to your mock-ups. So this is the rough copy, and we're a fair way away from mock-ups at this point, but it is good to know where you're heading. Looking at the second performance descriptor, it's about accomplished use of design elements and principles to create innovative ideas. So, trying new things out, not going for sort of staid and obvious solutions, but being really creative and thinking outside of the box. And looking at the well-developed rationale for the selection of the final designs evaluated in terms of the brief. So look, I would say in conclusion that this criteria really assesses your annotated mock-up for each presentation. So you write a pretty descriptive statement when it comes to your mock-up. And it's also about your use of the design elements and design principles throughout the design process, which is starting now. It's also the criteria which assesses how well you've critically and creatively thought about the use of them in your designs. And the way that you express your critical and creative thinking obviously is through your annotations and being really, really descriptive with these. So it might be good to refresh our memory on the design elements and design principles. Design elements are line, colour, form, point, shape, texture, tone and type. Now, we use these all the time. You use them all the time, but you're probably not aware of how well you use them. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Some elements are more prevalent than others. So, for example, in a piece of graphic design, you'll see colour, you'll see shape, you'll see type. These are pretty much the key elements, whereas in an architectural design, form, shape and texture are pretty key. The key to this criteria really is making sure that you express clearly that you're indeed aware of how you're using them and, deconstructing them, not just sort of doing a design and then coming back later and going, oh yeah, there's a bit of line there or there's a bit of colour there. It's actually being really, really critical and deliberate in the way that you're using them. Most students tend to lose marks on this criteria because they don't effectively identify or annotate, which really means they haven't really thought about using them properly. And really I can't stress enough how good it is to go through each of these elements and principles, and I'll just put the principles up there again, and to really go through them one by one if need be and think about them in detail and how you can actually use them to really maximise and create an effective idea for your presentation. Now, the Guthrie text goes into great detail on the design elements and design principles in Chapter 3. So it might be a good idea as you're, working through your design development that you have this chapter open, that every now and then you dip into it. You have a look, for example, at how line's been used or how cropping might have been used. So I think that will be a really good method to just make sure that you're ticking all the boxes there. Now let's look at some student examples to show you what I mean. So Sarah from last year, she designed a veterinary clinic, and this folio page shows the development of the windows because she was really interested in maximising light into the space. Now you can see here the use of the design element, which is a 2D geometric shape, just sort of basic squares and rectangles. And principles here, the design principles such as balance, scale and proportion have really been explored to create suitable options. Now if we look at a close-up of Sarah's work, you know, it reveals her analysis and her thinking behind using them. Let's pull out some keywords. She's explored proportion here, and she's also explored balance. And then she's given a description on why they were used, and in this case it's for effective, or it's effective in keeping an open environment. Now let's move on to Ben. Ben's used different design elements here to further develop his logo. So the type style, which is a design element, has already been established, but what Ben is exploring is the negative space within the type form. So he's used various shapes and line to do this. We've got different, we've got circles, we've got fish skeleton, we've got wave shapes, and you've also got line there on the bottom left hand side. There's a double outline around the BD type. Now let's go into a bit more detail. Now Ben could have really annotated more effectively here. Now shape is clearly used in the option on the left, and line is used on the option to the right. Yet he didn't actually identify that he'd used shape or line in his written annotation. If you have a quick skim there, you can see there's no mention of the words of the elements. But what he does do is he has mentioned how effectively the design meets the needs of the client and the audience, so that's a good thing. Well done, Ben. Now this is a refinement page again by Sarah. So this is for the veterinary clinic. She's come up with the identity design, and she's used the design principles to further refine the veterinary clinic identity. Now subtle variations are explored here, so looking at this page it probably looks like every single option is the same, but what we'll do now is go through each one a close-up so I can show you in a bit more detail. So here this example shows how the paint tool can enable her to change colour options for her logo. She identifies the design element of colour and then goes on to describe her choices in using the particular colours. So in this case she's talked about it creating a friendly vibe, and the final sentence provides an evaluation of the degree of success in using these design elements. So you can have a bit of a read of that. The lighter grass protrudes innocence, however it's a little hard to see with no clear outline and little contrast between the green and white background. So that's a pretty good evaluation there by Sarah. Moving on to her second option, she's talked about how she's used colour. Again, her annotation expresses the effect that darker hues have had on her identity. Hope you can read that. She's talked about fun, innocent and friendly vibe, and how lighter colours can produce this. So she's given an evaluation and talked about what she's going to try next. This example, Sarah has focused very much on typography, and she's actually looked for a computer-generated typeface that's very similar to the one she'd used. She's talking about curvature of lines and how they create a more established and bold look, with a very even and more professional look. And the darker colours, again, the colour, which is a design element, enable the logo to be seen and stand out more amongst the white background. And moving on to another option. In this one, Sarah identifies the design principle of balance and how the smaller text, veterinary clinic there in orange, has been positioned on the left to help create that effect of balance. And finally, Sarah in this one talks about colour, design element, and contrast, which is a design principle. She's also talked about balance, and in this case the asymmetrical balance. And you can see that the veterinary clinic is on the right hand side, but in her mind it's well balanced because of the other elements above, perhaps the placement of the G. So you know, she's given a really good explanation there. So I hope that's helped you to have a look at how you can use the design elements and design principles for criteria 5.